$50 stock. So Arnie dug deep into the, what was it, 10K, Arnie, of this?
Yeah, well, the 10Q.
The 10Q, and you went through and found out what's going on. So I'll give it to you, Arnie, but basically you found some pretty unique details on what it means for employees to get compensated over the next 5 years if the stock gets to certain levels. What did you find, and what does it mean for us as investors?
I was searching for details of another company I'm studying, and then I noticed a interesting compensation package for the CEO, and then let me think. Wait a second. I remember that last time Palantir had something new in the 10K that was something like performance RSU, and it was not mentioned in the earnings. So let me check if there is something new there. And actually, what I found was something new there on top of that performance RSU, which is a simple line that potentially changes everything, not only for employees, but also for us, since that creates a very strong incentive. The bottom line is employees the last quarter received a big part, a big package of this stuff called SARs, which are rights that only trigger, that are only valuable under if certain conditions are met. And this specific condition is the stock needs to be $50 just to trigger this, to make it something worth at least 1 cent. So if essentially the stock goes above these $50, then this premium that the employees can receive becomes more valuable. The higher the stock goes, the more it becomes valuable. And there's a cap in order not to bankrupt the company in the case it goes completely mad. But the idea is $50, the employees get the difference between the price and the $50. So zero, like $50 is the break-even.
Right.
And if it goes above that, employees receive a premium in cash, given the difference between that price and $50, which means the maximum is 70, and that brings $20 per SAR that the employee can receive.
And so 70 would be a 3x from this current price right now.
Yep. And the interesting thing is if we think of CAGR return needed to achieve this, because this has an expiration of 5 years. So this $50 needs to be reached in 5 years. And employees need to stay in the company for 5 years consecutively. So if they leave before, they don't get anything, regardless of how the stock goes. And the implication, what it means $50 from here. It means like a 20% CAGR for the revenues, for the stock price, just to get there. 20%, not bad. But if we want, if employees actually wanted to receive this premium, and the average per employee that they could receive is like a 250K, which is a good premium, I would say, the stock needs to be $70. $70 from the current $20 is like 30%.
Which is it's a 300% return from this price in 5 years, essentially.
It's like
it's not bad at all. That's amazing.
28% CAGR, but since there is also some dilution that goes against you, you need like a 30 something.
We need to grow. It needs to seriously grow for that to compound. Okay, Vince, what was your reaction when you saw Arnie dug this up?
2 reactions. One, I really hope a Delaware judge is not going to take this away after the fact when these things have vested, number one. And number 2 is I also read after Arnie posted it that it was counted with a Monte Carlo method to find the fair value, which, based on my understanding, is that they simulate different scenarios, and then they go into like what's the the most bullish, what's the most bearish, and then what, like, then they assign probabilities, and then they take like the highest probability. So I, how do you call it? Like, I think management is thinking that this has a good shot of happening. And that's obviously very bullish based on the calculations that they have made. And number three, I had some questions. So do you, Arnie, know if they're planning to phase out the stock-based compensation into these SARs so that they're going to go more towards this? Or is this like that they're keeping the existing SBC and then this is like a cash bonus added on top of it? Yeah.
I haven't really understood it yet completely. It seems to me that rather than just giving the normal RSU, they are giving less RSU compared with the other quarters, but more of these SARs, exactly in order to incentivize employees. Just a little detail to give context. That Monte Carlo simulation stuff that you mentioned is essentially how the people who need to write the 10Q need to write a number. So in order to say, okay, how much this actually cost for the company in actualized value for the quarter, they need to make this Monte Carlo simulation to give a number to put as the cost.
Right, because they're looking at the growth of the company, the potential projected growth, how much dilution would happen, and then how much it would cost management to even give out all that money. And their argument is this $50 price and that $20 delta is like what's the most fair for the company, which is bullish to an extent because it means that, I mean, $70 by 2029, I don't think anyone would be upset with that. But it's just a question if it can get there. Matt, you actually work at a company where you get stock options and RSUs and things of that nature. You probably haven't dug that deep into what Arnie found, but on first glance, what does it mean to you? And do you think it is the right alignment with employees and shareholders?
So I agree that there needs to be a performance component and there needs to be a time component. So I won't go into too much depth about UDOC and things of the like, but there needs to be some sort of time-based component strictly based off the fact that you want to retain talent for a certain amount of time. And so it gives you, let's just say if it's substantial enough, and let's just say it's 20 or 30% of an annual salary or something like that, that vests over a 5-year period, then that's going to be like, well, I'm going to forfeit X amount of dollars if I leave this company. And it's also a bargaining chip to another company that, let's just say they want to go to Google, then they would say, well, I have this amount of shares remaining, and Google could either say, well, we'll buy them out or not, right? And then that's another bargaining chip that either would make somebody go to Google, or they could be like, well, you know, I'm not just going to walk away from $100,000 worth of options, right? And so there's that piece. But I also agree with the performance-based aspect of it. And I've seen several companies in my industry, specifically not technology, but in the oil and gas industry, where if you align a company towards these, what they call BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals, and align people to what you really want it to be, then it's amazing what a group can do. If you can really focus people and say, this is the target that we need to get to in 5 years' time, then you can see some really remarkable shit happen. I've seen companies say, hey, if you meet this goal in 5 years in terms of production numbers or revenue numbers, etc., we'll buy everyone in the company, from the janitors in the company all the way to the CEO of the company, a $75,000 car or a $50,000 bonus. You could use that money to buy a $75,000 car, or if you don't want the car, you could just get the $50,000 cash. And a lot of times, believe it or not, they hit that goal. So, I think if you were to say, and I'm sure what this is by 2030, if we hit the, $50 stock target, then everyone walks away with X amount. But the thing is, and I've seen this do this a little bit differently in different organizations. Some of it's performance-based, some of it's tenure-based. I get that. There's a component to, specifically when you talk about like the C-level, right? The executive suite, where majority of the time, a lot of those guys get their options based off of performance anyway. And so my question is, and this is one thing that I've got to ask Arnie here, is, does it explicitly say within any of the documents you've looked at, or specifically this 10Q, and I have it up here as well, who in the organization gets this, or is it specific towards everybody? And that's an important piece as well, because we had something similar at UDoc for a particular 4 or 5 year time period. And depending on where you were in the organization, some of it was performance-based and some of it was time-based. So where some of it was both time-based and performance-based, and some of us, the lower-level employees, are strictly time-based. So
yeah, basically your question is this just for engineers, or is this for like...
Exactly. Is it just C-level employees?
I don't think it's just for the management, because the management is already well compensated with options. That's typically they go to compensate the management. From what I read, these SARs are more a way to compensate employees. Now, I don't know if all employees or only the engineers.
Dude, you can't discriminate against employees, though, right? You can't say the product managers don't get this, but the engineers do. Is that a thing?
Well, maybe just the degrees changes. I have personally no idea, but I think it is really important to have like all the company aligned. So since we don't really know who gets what, I think it would be great to have all the company aligned. Like the management is already very aligned. The problem that personally I was facing before as an investor without having this component is, yes, you have people that receive stock-based compensation. So they receive stocks and they want the stock to be more valuable. But if they receive stock just for working, and with RSU, every year you vest your shares. So it's like if you work 1 year, you get the shares, you get 2 years, you get more shares, and so on. But it was missing a component of performance. Now, I would have personally preferred a performance based on revenue or free cash flow, but I can't complain. Like I like the idea of the management being aligned with employees, being aligned with shareholders, because let's say that if a stock goes to 50, just to break even, to 70 in 5 years, we can't really complain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I mean, like, go ahead, Vince.
No, do we know that the only thing that makes it vest is the stock price, or is there any other?
No, it is the stock price. It is explicitly said the target is 50 with a maximum of $20 per SAR, meaning $70 at most. I think the important thing to underscore here, since everybody is freaking out, further more dilution, stop it, is this is a mechanism to have alignment without issuing new shares, because the payment is done in cash. So let's say the stock goes at 70, each employee for each SAR receives $20 cash. So can Palantir actually pay that? Well, having 4 billion in cash actually helps that. So if we go through the previous case saying all like the maximum premium $70, so $20 per SARS, the math is almost $900 million. So the question is, would you pay 1 billion out of these 4 billion while you are very free cash flow positive to have all the employees aligned as a sort of bonus? Personally, I would.
But by the way, it's not for... I was just going to say the cash by that time is like, if you just assume 1 billion per year, then it's like 9 million.
9 billion, yeah.
9 billion, yeah. But it goes back to what Arnie said, right? So $50 is the trigger. If we're using the $70 example, that's 880 million, right? So 44 million times $20, they would have to come out of pocket 880 million, which to me, if that's once every 5 years, if they do something like this once every 5 years, I'm fine with that, because they're already churning out 600 or 700 million dollars a year now, and they're only going to grow to, just like what Vince said, probably close to 800 million this year. Next year it's going to be over $1 billion in terms of cash going to the bottom line and being in the bank. So you're getting to a place where if you could spare 20% of that cash flow to keep employees happy and align the company to continue to to grow further, then to me it's pretty fine with me, especially knowing that they've been able to grow revenue pretty substantially, keep cost basis down. And if this is going to continue to help with that and keep cost basis down as well as dilution down, then that's only beneficial for us in the long term, if you think about it in that perspective.
Do you think this is the right way, or would you have expected something different?
I think this is the right way. And the reason for that is because even if there is dilution and there's some, weird ways to get to the $70 number, all we care about as shareholders is that the stock is $70, right? Most of us have averages below 20. I think even by then, if we average up to $20 or something, or $18, $22, stock's at $70 in 3 years. I mean, that's like, I don't know how much better it could get. Like, it's $20 today, 2024, 5 years, it's $70, assuming like the best case for the stars. That's a nice return. That's more than a 3x, actually. It's like not every stock can be Nvidia that goes up 115% in 1 year, right? And in 70, one could argue is conservative. Now, I will take the other side and say 70 is pretty optimistic, but still, that's good. So even if there's dilution or whatever has to be to get there, if we're all sitting pretty on our shares, and at that point the company's well established and there's no way they're going bankrupt and all these other risks, we just have to wait for another 5 years for this thing to maybe be 140, right? And really get to the levels where we can make real good money.
I mean, what's really interesting is, this is like accounting trickery, and like what I'm explaining is you need to give pay to the employees, right? And then if you give stock-based compensation, it's like you're giving the pay but not in cash, and then it doesn't, like, that's why you can have this adjusted EBITDA, right? Yep. But then you can offset it by buying back shares, which is like, it doesn't go on your bookkeeping, because buying back shares is not a cost, as far as I know, in the company's bookkeeping, right? So it's like a little bit of accounting trickery. Like, then this one is like you're giving out the cash, so it's going to come on the P&L, I guess, as actual salary for the people. But it's like, again, the same thing. You're giving pay to your, like, you're giving compensation to the employees. So it's just something to think with, that it's an additional cost, and you can call it stock-based compensation, you can call it a salary, you can call it SAR. It's just something to think with.